Living alone is often misunderstood. Society paints it as a sign of failure, loneliness, or emotional weakness. People assume that if someone chooses solitude, it must be because they couldn't adjust, couldn't love, or couldn't be loved. But the truth is far deeper than that. Living alone is not always a choice made out of comfort. Many times, it is a decision made out of wisdom, self-respect, and survival. Because while loneliness can hurt, being surrounded by the wrong people can slowly destroy a person from the inside. There is a special kind of pain that comes from being with people who don't understand you, don't value you, or don't respect your boundaries. It's the pain of feeling invisible in a room full of faces. It's the pain of speaking and not being heard, of loving and not being appreciated, of giving your best and still being made to feel like you are not enough. That kind of pain is far heavier than the silence of being alone. When you live with the wrong people, you start losing yourself without even realizing it. You begin to doubt your thoughts, question your worth, and shrink your dreams just to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. You laugh when you want to cry. You agree when you want to scream. You stay quiet because your voice has been ignored too many times. Over time, you don't just feel lonely, you feel erased. Living alone, on the other hand, confronts you with yourself. It forces you to face your fears, your thoughts, and your emotions without distractions. Yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, there are nights when the silence feels too loud and the walls feel too close. But in that silence, something powerful begins to happen. You start listening to yourself again. You start understanding who you are when no one is influencing your choices, judging your actions, or controlling your emotions. Being alone teaches you self-reliance. You learn how to pick yourself up after a bad day, how to celebrate your small victories, and how to comfort yourself when no one else is around. You realize that your happiness cannot depend entirely on other people, because people are unpredictable. They change, they leave, they disappoint. But when you build a strong relationship with yourself, you become your own safe place. Wrong company doesn't always look wrong in the beginning. Sometimes it comes disguised as love, friendship, or family. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones closest to us. They may not always use harsh words or obvious cruelty. Sometimes the damage is done through constant negativity, manipulation, emotional neglect, or silent competition. Slowly, their presence drains your energy, dims your confidence, and steals your peace. Many people stay in unhealthy relationships because they are afraid of being alone. They fear the judgment of society, the questions of relatives, and the whispers of neighbors. They choose familiar pain over unfamiliar peace. But what they don't realize is that staying with the wrong people out of fear is far more dangerous than walking alone with courage. Fear keeps you trapped. Solitude sets you free. Living alone gives you space, space to heal, space to grow, and space to rediscover your true self. You are no longer constantly adjusting your behavior to please others. You no longer walk on eggshells, afraid of triggering someone's anger or disappointment. You breathe freely. You think clearly. You start making decisions based on what feels right for you, not what is expected of you. There is also a quiet strength that develops in solitude. You become emotionally independent. You stop begging for attention, validation, or approval. You understand that being chosen by yourself is more important than being chosen by others. This strength makes you more selective about who you allow into your life. You stop entertaining people who bring drama, disrespect, or negativity. Your standards rise, not because you think you are better than others, but because you finally understand your worth. Being alone does not mean hating people or rejecting relationships. It simply means you refuse to settle for connections that cost you your peace. It means you value quality over quantity. One genuine connection becomes more valuable than 100 fake ones. One honest conversation becomes better than years of forced togetherness. Ironically, people who learn to live alone often build the healthiest relationships later in life. Because they no longer need someone to complete them, they want someone to share life with. There is a huge difference between need and choice. When you choose someone from a place of emotional stability, the relationship becomes balanced, respectful, and real. Of course, solitude is not always easy. There are days when loneliness creeps in quietly. Days when you wish you had someone to talk to, someone to sit beside you, someone to understand your silence. But even on those days, remember this: loneliness is temporary, but the damage caused by wrong people can last for years. Emotional scars take time to heal. Lost confidence takes time to rebuild. Broken self-esteem takes time to restore. Living alone teaches patience. It teaches you how to sit with discomfort without running back to toxic familiarity. It teaches you how to wait for the right people instead of settling for the wrong ones. And most importantly, it teaches you that your peace is priceless. In a world that constantly pressures us to be surrounded by others, choosing solitude can feel like rebellion. But sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Walk away from people who make you feel small. Walk away from relationships that drain your energy. Walk away from environments that suffocate your growth. Even if it means walking alone for a while. Because the truth is simple yet powerful. It is better to be alone and at peace than to be surrounded and miserable. It is better to sit with silence than to listen to constant negativity. It is better to miss people than to lose yourself. One day, when the right people enter your life, they won't make you feel afraid of being alone. They won't control you, belittle you, or compete with you. They will respect your space, honor your boundaries, and add value to your life. And when that day comes, you'll be grateful you didn't waste your heart on the wrong ones. Until then, choose yourself. Choose peace. Choose growth. Even if the path is lonely at times, it leads to clarity, strength, and self-respect. And that is a journey worth taking. Because living alone may be difficult, but living with the wrong people is far more destructive. With time, solitude stops feeling like a punishment and slowly starts becoming a teacher. At first, it only shows you what you've lost: people, routines, familiar voices, shared moments. But as days turn into weeks, and weeks into months, solitude begins to show you something far more important: what you've been carrying that was never yours to begin with. Other people's expectations, other people's insecurities, other people's emotional burdens. When those weights fall away, you realize how exhausted you truly were. Many people don't understand how draining wrong relationships can be because the damage is silent. There are no visible wounds. No dramatic scenes every day. Just a constant feeling of heaviness. A constant second-guessing of your words. A constant need to explain yourself. Over time, you forget what peace feels like. You forget what it means to wake up without tension in your chest. Solitude gives you that feeling back. Slowly and gently. When you are alone, you begin to notice your own rhythms. You sleep when your body needs rest, not when someone else decides the day is over. You eat when you're hungry, not when it's convenient for others. You speak when you feel like speaking, and you stay silent without guilt. These small freedoms may seem ordinary, but for someone who has lived under emotional pressure, they feel revolutionary. One of the most painful realizations that comes in solitude is understanding how much of yourself you abandoned just to keep others comfortable. You remember times you swallowed your opinions to avoid conflict, times you accepted disrespect just to avoid being alone, times you stayed in places where you were not valued, simply because leaving felt too scary. Solitude forces honesty, and honesty, while painful at first, is the doorway to healing. Healing does not happen all at once. It comes in waves. Some days you feel strong, independent, and proud of choosing yourself. Other days, memories hit without warning. A laugh you miss, a habit you shared, a version of life you once imagined. These moments do not mean you made the wrong choice. They mean you are human. Missing people does not mean they were good for you. Sometimes, we miss familiarity, not health. Being alone also teaches you emotional responsibility. You stop blaming others for how you feel, because there is no one else in the room. You learn to sit with sadness instead of escaping it through distractions or unhealthy attachments. You learn to understand your triggers, your fears, and your patterns. This self-awareness is uncomfortable, but it is powerful. It gives you control over your future choices. There is a quiet confidence that grows when you realize you can survive on your own. You no longer panic at the idea of people leaving. You no longer cling desperately to relationships out of fear. You understand that while companionship is beautiful, it is not oxygen. You can breathe on your own. And that realization changes everything. People who fear being alone often tolerate behavior they should never accept. They stay where they are not respected. They excuse emotional neglect. They normalize manipulation. Solitude breaks this cycle. Once you've tasted peace alone, chaos becomes unbearable. You become allergic to drama. You notice red flags faster. You walk away sooner. Not because you are cold, but because you are finally awake. As solitude reshapes you, your definition of happiness changes. Happiness no longer means constant noise, endless social interaction, or approval from others. It becomes something quieter, a calm mind, a peaceful home, honest conversations, a life that feels aligned with who you truly are. You stop chasing people and start building a life that attracts the right ones naturally. There is also a spiritual side to being alone that many people overlook. In solitude, you reflect more. You question life, purpose, and direction. You realize that no human can fill every void inside you. Some spaces are meant to be filled with self-growth, faith, creativity, or meaning. When you stop expecting people to complete you, relationships stop feeling like battles and start feeling like blessings. Being alone also makes you stronger in love. When love comes from a place of wholeness instead of desperation, it becomes healthier. You don't lose yourself in someone else's world. You don't sacrifice your values just to keep someone close. You don't fear honest conversations. You love deeply, but you also respect yourself fiercely. Of course, not everyone will understand your choice. Some will call you proud. Some will say you've changed. Some will accuse you of becoming distant. Let them talk. Growth often looks like distance to those who benefited from your silence. Protecting your peace will always offend those who thrived on your self-neglect. Solitude also teaches you to enjoy your own company. You discover hobbies you forgot you loved. Music that speaks to your soul. Books that feel like conversations with wiser versions of yourself. Moments of laughter that don't depend on anyone else. You realize that boredom was never the problem, emotional exhaustion was. There comes a point when you no longer feel lonely even when you are alone. You feel centered, grounded, content, and that is when you know you have crossed an important bridge. You are no longer running away from people, nor are you running toward them. You are simply standing firm in who you are. This doesn't mean you'll never feel pain again. Life doesn't work that way. But now, pain doesn't break you the way it used to. You trust yourself to handle it. You know you won't abandon yourself just to avoid discomfort. That trust is priceless. Eventually, the right people do arrive. Not in a rush, not with noise, but with ease. They don't compete with your solitude, they complement it. They don't demand constant access to you, they respect your space. They don't drain your energy, they add to it. And because you learn to live alone, you recognize them when they come. Until that moment, solitude continues to shape you into someone stronger, calmer, and wiser. Someone who understands that being alone is not emptiness, it is preparation. Preparation for a life where you no longer beg for respect, chase affection, or tolerate emotional harm. So if you are walking alone right now, don't rush the journey. Don't shame yourself for choosing peace over chaos. Don't believe the lie that solitude means failure. Sometimes, it means courage. Sometimes, it means growth. Sometimes, it means you finally chose yourself. And that choice, no matter how lonely it feels at times, will always be the right one.